Yeah, you'd think that the relatives and children of Ted Kennedy would know a car wreck when they see one, and not endorse Joe Biden. But you know, hey, it's crazy times. But
And I mean, no offense to you, Piers, personally on this at all, but I hate the idea of like royalty in politics and that there's like, there's this no one even like knows anything about half the people involved, but yet their word means something. And I'll just say, I mean, look, my first thought about it, and I've been very critical of RFK lately over his position on the war in Gaza, but as somebody who like knows the guy, it's just, I find it wrong to come out like this against your own family. I mean, like, I understand if you don't want to support him because you don't agree with him on the issues, but I just could never imagine, like, if my brother or my sister or something like that were running for something, publicly coming out, trying to campaign against them.
Meanwhile, the family of Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, just came out today and has endorsed Donald Trump to win this 2024 election. You can see the picture of the family here, and I just find it so funny and hilarious. And that's why I chose to make this video today, because every time they say Joe Biden in this video, because it is from a few months ago, you can pretty much insert Kamala Harris's name and the conversation still works. It goes hand in hand together because Kamala Harris is essentially Joe Biden's vice president, and so she's equally responsible for all the failures that happened during Joe Biden's 4 years. And in this one, Dave Smith and Benny Johnson pretty much steamroll over woke streamer Destiny. It's always a good time, so let's go ahead and get her started.
Okay, Destiny, I mean, the trouble with the cannibals thing is that so much of what Biden says from his memory turns out to be completely untrue. I'm not suggesting he deliberately lies. He just constantly seems to forget key parts of his life. And then they don't even apologize. I mean, the White House press secretary was given the chance to apologize by Fox News, by Peter Doocy, and refused to do so. Would it not be right for the White House to just, when they get things wrong like this, just to say we're sorry? The president spoke wrong.
You said the plane crashed in the water. Okay, who says cannibals can't swim? All right, we don't know that. Listen, I understand the spectacle.
A little bit of a stretch, Destiny.
But hey, maybe. Listen, I don't know what they're like. Okay, listen, I've never been to New Guinea before. Okay. Listen, like, there's always the gaffes and there's everything that's fun to talk about. But it says something that every time Trump makes a gaffe, I hear this repeated over and over again. We are not supposed to take Trump literally. We're supposed to take him seriously. When Trump says there's an invisible plane, he didn't actually mean that. When Trump was like on stage, pondering about the injection of disinfectant into your lungs, well, he wasn't serious. Well, when Trump talks about cyber, he's just like speaking metaphorically. I don't know, man. At the end of the day, like, Biden is a gaffe machine. George W. Bush was a gaffe machine, and he couldn't even blame senility on that. I agree that his speaking stuff is a problem. I definitely think that his memory has issues, but I'm more concerned with Trump, like, on TV, telling the DOJ that they should be jailing political opponents. I'm more concerned with the fact that Trump, who's not even in office, we were just talking about immigration, which is a real issue. Trump is literally communicating to people in the House, like, hey, don't vote on immigration bills. I want to keep the border open so that when I run for president, I can point to that problem existing. The fact that Republicans were unwilling to actually come together and work on what was an amazing border reform bill, something that would have increased the amount of asylum judges, something that would have decreased the amount of people that could just come to the border and claim asylum. Like, these things would have been amazing. Dave Smith talks about a de facto open borders policy. The de facto open borders policy is not de facto, it's de jure. It's by letter of the law. If somebody comes to the U.S. and they say, hey, I'm claiming asylum, well, you're kind of, SOL. Okay, well, I guess we've got to put you in the U.S. now and we have to process you because that's the policy on the books. And Republicans were the ones that stood in the way of actually changing that policy in the House because they didn't want to lose their one issue that they could hopefully artificially continue to, I guess, make this country look bad for their upcoming election, which I think is unpatriotic and I think is damaging to the United States. And I wish the Republicans were held to account more for that type of self-destructive behavior.
Dave Smith.
Holy smokes, did you see that mouth moving? He must have drank like 13 Dr. Peppers. But seriously, Destiny, that's the problem with the Democratic Party, and I even see it within my circle of friends. Anytime Donald Trump makes a joke, they take everything that he says seriously, and they try to use it against him. It's kind of disgusting, the standard that you want to hold Donald Trump to, yet the standard that you let your own candidates get away with. I mean, Kamala Harris won't even do an interview. The one that she just did was on CNN, and they edited out like half of it. And not only that, she had Tim Walz right there with her. She couldn't even do it by herself. But still, either these Democrats need to learn how to discern, or they need to just lighten up. Francis.
On the Kennedys, let's watch the clip of Kerry Kennedy endorsing Biden.
My siblings and representing my first cousins, all of whom, with the exception of two, all who are legally able are supporting Joe Biden
And Kamala Harris.
for re-election. And we cannot stand aside when we're up against a man who says he wants to be a dictator. We need to stop Trump.
Now, it's interesting. When I watched her with the other members of the family, and I compared them to RFK, who I think has been a really impressive candidate in his own way, I'm not sure this is particularly good for Biden. I mean, there's the Kennedy magic, sure, but actually the most impressive Kennedy out there is RFK. And it all looks like in the latest polling that his run could be more beneficial to Trump than Biden, I think I'm right in saying. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, you'd think that the relatives and children of Ted Kennedy would know a car wreck when they see one and not endorse Joe Biden. But, hey, it's crazy times. But what's crazier is connecting the John F. Kennedy or RFK legacies to Joe Biden. They have absolutely no similarities whatsoever. JFK was anti-interventionist. JFK wanted to end the Vietnam War, not accelerate wars around the globe. JFK wanted to have major oversight over the deep state and over run amok and run wild intelligence agencies. JFK wanted a crackdown on the crimes that were actually occurring here. He was a law and order candidate, and he wanted lower taxes. And so there is literally zero connection to the legacy of JFK to Joe Biden. So the Kennedy family is desecrating that memory.
Dave Smith, I mean, does it help Biden really to have a bunch of slightly doddery Kennedys all standing around, some of them looking like they didn't know what they were doing there, when RFK Jr. is, like I say, a pretty impressive operator who's clearly resonating with a lot of Americans?
I don't think it helps Biden at all. And I mean, no offense to you, Piers, personally on this at all, but I hate the idea of like royalty in politics and that there's like, there's this no one even like knows anything about half the people involved, but yet their word means something. And I'll just say, I mean, look, my first thought about it, and I've been very critical of RFK lately over his position on the war in Gaza, but as somebody who like knows the guy, it's just, I find it wrong to come out like this against your own family. I mean, like, I understand if you don't want to support him because you don't agree with him on the issues, but I just could never imagine, like, if my brother or my sister or something like that were running for something, publicly coming out, trying to campaign against them. And I think at least that's the way it rubs me. Like, I'm a family guy before any other political opinion that I have. And it just kind of, it makes them all feel snaky to me.
Destiny, I want to end with quite an interesting moment this week between a podcast between Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson on Joe's podcast, in which Tucker Carlson was asked about nuclear weapons. And he said this.
Well, I love, by the way, that people on my side, I'll just admit it, on the right, have spent the last 80 years defending dropping nuclear weapons on civilians. Like, are you joking?
Right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great savings. Like, no, it's wrong to drop nuclear weapons on people. And if you find yourself arguing that it's a good thing to drop nuclear weapons on people, then you are evil. Like, it's not a tough one, right? It's not a hard call for you. It's not a hard call for me.
So that was interesting. There's also another interesting Tucker-related moment this week where Mitch McConnell said this about him.
Sir, I think the demonization of Ukraine began by Tucker Carlson, who, in my opinion, ended up where he should have been all along, which is interviewing Vladimir Putin. And so he had an enormous audience, which convinced a lot of rank-and-file Republicans that maybe this was a mistake.
So two interesting Tucker-related things there. I mean, Destiny, on the first point, what is your view about the morality of nuclear weapons? Is there ever a justification? Was it right for America to drop bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to prevent, as they saw it at the time, potentially millions more people being slaughtered?
Man, that's a big question. I think that in retrospect, I think that we view nuclear weapons a little bit more special than they actually are. I think that people had this idea that in World War II, when we were fighting with Japan, we would attack a city and 100 people would die. We'd do a huge bombing run and maybe a couple thousand people would die. And then the nuclear bombs dropped and it was 40,000, 60,000. It was like, oh my God, it was an unprecedented massacre. The reality was the bombing campaigns that happened during World War II were insane. There are huge death counts. Dresden, in a single day, I think like 25,000 people were disintegrated. For the fire bombings of Tokyo, I think in 1 to 2 days, it was, some estimates are as high as like 130,000 people were killed. So I don't think that nuclear weapons should get a special carve out in terms of like, was it okay to nuke or was it not okay to nuke? Because the question is, it really has to do with bombing in general and the civilian cost of any war in general. And any war is always going to incur, any war between two great powers or any two people are going to incur a great deal of civilian death. It seems to be an unavoidable aspect of war. And I don't think nuclear weapons are like a special part of that, because conventional bombing runs and conventional ground warfare have led to huge civilian casualties, regardless of nuclear weapons being used or not. Regardless of your stance on the Israeli-Gaza war, I mean, there's a lot of civilians that are dead and are casualties of that war. No nuclear weapons have been used whatsoever.
Right. I think it's a good point. And just quickly on Tucker and Mitch McConnell, do you think McConnell had a point there? Do you think that this weird thing where you have a big section of the Republican Party very hostile about helping Ukraine, which perhaps historically wouldn't have been the case, is that down to Tucker, do you think?
I feel like everybody, it just feels like we have these reactionary trends where, in the 90s and in the 2000s, conservatives got so mad about, gay people and metrosexuals and, progressives are like, okay, well, now we don't even, a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man, screw you. And everybody's like so reactionary in how they view things. And now you've got the Republican Party who's like, well, screw everything that the Democrats stand for. Like, we actually think Putin is based and strong and America is weak and they have too much LGBT stuff. And we're going to support every single person that is against America because we think they're stronger, better leaders and America shouldn't be involved in anything. And when I look at the Ukrainian-Russian stuff, that's kind of what it feels like to me. Like, I very rarely hear like a principled take on whether or not we should be intervening in that conflict. It usually just comes down to some weird quasi-libertarian, like, oh, well, we shouldn't be involved in any foreign conflict whatsoever. And it's like, really? Is that really the stance we want to take? Is that how we would have felt in the first Gulf War? Is that how we would have felt with Yugoslavia or Bosnia? Is that how we would have felt with World War II? Is that, should South Korea and North Korea be one country that America never did anything with? Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like there's much like intellectual thought to mine on the anti-interventionist train of thought that's currently running through the Conservative Party.
Okay, interesting. Benny, on that first point, the morality of nuclear war, where do you sit with that?
Yeah, so I think also it's very wise to take a step back and look from a 35,000-foot perspective as to what is the industry of our federal government. Why are the richest counties in America, 8 of the top 10 richest counties in America, not Beverly Hills, not Miami, not Wall Street, all in the circumference of Washington, D.C. What's in the circumference of Washington, D.C.? It is a rat-infested, crime-riddled hellscape that is horrible to live in. I lived there for 15 years. Why would all of these counties around D.C. be so bloody rich? What is their industry? Their industry is war. And that is why in my lifetime, America has always been at war, has been at forever war. There's always a war that is being concocted and created. That is the industry of permanent Washington. And that is evil. And from a moral perspective, it is evil. And the older you get, and I have 3 kids, the more I like think about my kids being draft age, the more I think about like, honestly, F you guys. If you think that like my kids are just cannon fodder for a couple extra points on your Raytheon stock, they're not.
But what about
they're moral human beings. And
okay,
so,
I hear
it's
you.
like, you got to step back and say like, why do these people continue to push for war? Why do they hate anti-interventionism?
Okay.
And what the hell are we doing in Ukraine? I mean,
Okay,
it really is a question. Is the $60 billion really win the war?
But just on that one point about when America dropped the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki because they were trying to end an existential threat to Western civilization, the Nazis, was that justified, do you think?
I think ending war is good. I think ending war is good, but oftentimes, again, the older you get, the more you realize that war is not a side of like the angels versus the devil. Oftentimes, war is 2 different devils fighting for evil causes, and the people who are caught in the middle are the carnage, and those are our children. Those are just normally. It's never the politicians' children.
Okay.
It's never anyone in power's children. America has been led by draft dodgers for my entire life, Piers. My entire life, you've had Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Joe Biden is a draft dodger, John Kerry is a draft dodger. none of these people have ever served.
Actually,
right?
As somebody whose brother was a serving army colonel and brother-in-law was a serving army colonel, you make a very good point. Very quickly, right. Benny, just a quick yes or no. Do you think that Tucker's been the major influence about the anti-Ukraine sentiment?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
and a good one, and an excellent one, and something that's really good to shake the conservative side awake and say, wait a second, which country do you wish to put first? And,
we're running out of time. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you short. We are running out of time. Just Dave Smith, just quickly on those 2 points then. The morality of nuclear weapons, where do you sit with that?
Okay, well, to correct something you said there, we did not drop the nuclear weapons to end the existential threat that was Nazism. The Nazis had already been defeated. Adolf Hitler was already dead, and the fighting in Europe was over. This is why 5-star General Dwight Eisenhower was against them. He said it was horrible, and he also said it was unnecessary strategically, and that Japan was ready to negotiate.
That's an important clarification. You're right, yeah.
Yeah, and on the second point, look, Tucker gets a lot of credit. He's very influential in the right wing in America. But no, the reason why the America First movement rose up and why the Republicans have gone more non-interventionist is because of the 20 years of disastrous, catastrophic terror wars. Every last one of them being an utter disaster that did nothing but slaughter hundreds of thousands of people, cost trillions of dollars, and leave our bravest young men blowing their brains out by the tens of thousands. That's what has brought about this non-interventionist streak amongst Republican voters.
An excellent point there at the end. And I'll add that the cost involved is also weighing heavily on American taxpayers, and we just don't want to do it anymore, especially when our own country doesn't seem to be as secure as it should be. And with that, I'll just leave it right there. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.